The Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals have developed a little rivalry over the last handful of years, and Ja'Marr Chase talked a little spicy about the Ravens and the rest of the AFC North, as well as snubbed Marlon Humphrey. We talk about that, Mark Andrews opening up, and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher, Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this Monday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe. We're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, plus more. We have the regularly scheduled show, which is this Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also sometimes have bonus episodes on the weekend. We go live after every single Ravens piece of big news, after every single Ravens game. And we also have now introduced the Ravens Squad Show, which is a live hour-long Ravens show with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail, covering all things Baltimore Ravens. Thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Man, I know it's not the official start of training camp, but in the final part of the show, I can't believe we're saying it. Rookies are reporting to training camp tomorrow. Another step, checkbox checked off with the whole 9 yards. We're going to do a little rookie preview in the final part of the show. In the second part of the show, Mark Andrews opened up over the weekend. I want to talk about what he had to say, particularly about his situation in Baltimore and a little bit about the Buffalo game as well. But in the first part of the show, Ja'Marr Chase sat down, he had an interview, and he snubbed Marlon Humphrey from a top cornerback list. We'll talk about who he mentioned on that list and why Marlon wasn't on there. And we will also dive into Marlon talking a little spicy about the Ravens and the AFC North, and if the Ravens and other teams accumulating talent is to stop the Bengals. We'll talk about that. Let's start off with the Ja'Marr Chase conversation here. We know that Ja'Marr Chase has been absolutely unreal against the Ravens. I mean, if I had to tell you, which team has Ja'Marr Chase like to play against the most, it's the Ravens. I mean, I'll just read off these stats here quickly. Ja'Marr Chase has played in 8 games against the Ravens. He has a total of 58 catches for 962 yards and 8 touchdowns in those 8 games. So 1 touchdown per game. If you want to go just based off of the average amount of stats he has in these games, he averages about 7 receptions for 120 yards and a touchdown a game. I mean, it's ridiculous numbers. Ja'Marr has had the Ravens number for the entirety of his career. He is the guy that has been, I think, the toughest receiver for the Ravens to cover over these last handful of years. He's incredible. He's one of the best receivers in the league, in my opinion, and he deserves that respect. Now, he sat down in an interview. It was the sit down with Malaki Wright, and there were a lot of topics that were discussed on this, but there were a couple that caught my eyes and ears as I was listening and watching this. Particularly, he was asked about, first of all, he was asked about the Marlon Humphrey situation. I want to get to that in a few minutes. I'm going to start with the AFC North conversation. Essentially, he was asked about if these AFC North teams adding all this talent is to stop Cincinnati. You know, it was about, the Steelers are bringing in Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay, and, the Ravens, they have Jaire Alexander. He's brought in, and actually, it was mentioned that Jaire actually missed a matchup with Ja'Marr Chase during Jamar's rookie season. So, Ja'Marr mentioned earlier in the show, in the interview, that, he hasn't really gone up against a bunch of guys because, NFC, it's different. Like AFC North, you get a lot of those reps. But essentially what Jamar's answer was here to, do you think AFC North teams are adding talent? Is that to stop Cincinnati? He said, quote, I'm sure Ravens get DBs every year, so everybody's getting new pieces of the puzzle to complete what they're trying to do. I don't blame them. At the end of the day, everyone knows what we can do over here. We aren't hiding it at the end of the day. Overall, I think it's going to be great matchups all across the board. Inside, slot, from the outside. I think it's going to be fun. Twice a year, that's a lot of reps, and I like that for me. I know they're going to be excited, so I know it's going to be exciting for me. Jamar is someone that has been unreal. And from Baltimore's perspective, as I read out those stats earlier, I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous. Now, in terms of the actual winning factor here, Lamar Jackson has had Joe Burrow and that Bengals team's number over the course of his career, but you can't deny the impact. I mean, last year is a prime example of this, right? Jamar Chase in those 2 games against Baltimore, first game, 10 receptions for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns. The next game, 11 receptions for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Ravens won both of those games. They honestly, in my opinion, had no business winning them, but they did. Lamar Jackson and that offense, credit to him, because that defense couldn't do anything to stop Jamar Chase. Now, it's crazy because that primetime game in 2023, that was Jamar's worst game against Baltimore, 2 catches for 12 yards. You want to guess who was on Jamar Chase for a lot of those reps? It's Brandon Stevens. It was Brandon Stevens. It was, man, I missed 2023 Brandon Stevens. But, Marlon missed both those games against the Bengals in 2023, and Brandon Stevens held it down for him. And so maybe it was, we'll get to in a couple minutes, that is why maybe for Jamar, Marlon Humphrey was off of this list. But to me, I think that, are the Ravens adding talent to beat the Bengals? For the Steelers and for the Browns, those are different conversations. I think that, yes, those teams might be adding to stop the Bengals and to try to prevent them, in the Browns' case, from staying on top of them in the AFC North, or for the Steelers, preventing the Bengals from catching up to them. But I think for the Ravens, just in my opinion here, we're past that. We're past that, in my opinion, for the Ravens, where I think the Ravens have bigger goals. And look, they're going to add talent. Yes, I think the Bengals are in mind, like they're one of the teams that are in mind, where you have a lot of teams across the league who have really potent wide receiver duos. Now, Cincinnati's is one of the best in the league. In fact, it might be the best, right? There is no debate that those two, and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, are a problem when they're both on and they're both healthy. But there are also a lot of other teams you can make that argument for, and while it might not be as potent as the Bengals, there are a lot of teams that honestly have more weapons than the Bengals do. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I think, are the best duo, or at least one of them, but they don't really have a lot of guys outside of those two. Whereas the Ravens adding all this talent, it's like, yeah, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, boom, you got to stop those guys. If you can stop those guys, you're probably going to have a good day against the Bengals. Now, that's easier said than done, but let's go to a team like the Chiefs, for example, right? Those are the Chiefs, the Bills, etc., like those top teams. Where the Chiefs, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown, Travis Kelce, Pacheco, like you have those guys. The Bills with James Cook and Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, Kincaid, like, that list goes on and on. Keon Coleman is expected to take a leap for them this year. Like, those teams have depth and talent. In the AFC North, yeah, the Bengals have the most potent wide receiver duo in that division. It is not a question. But I think that the Ravens have that goal of a Super Bowl. And that is, okay, you got to build for a lot of teams here. And while I think that it is, and I don't think teams operate this way, I think it'd be foolish to build your team to beat just one particular team or stop one particular team. But you can't have enough corners. You can't have enough secondary members. And look, for the Ravens and the Bengals, it has been a rivalry over the last handful of seasons. I think more so for the Bengals and the Ravens. But, regardless, I mean, I remember Eli Apple, doing the big trust in the locker room. Tyler Boyd, when he was in Cincinnati, I know he's known for the, knocking the Ravens out of the playoffs, but, that's what happened. And then, he's posting the buses saying bye when the Bengals got the better of the Ravens again. Like, it has that edge to it. But again, it hasn't felt like a rivalry. Lamar Jackson dominates both the Bengals and the Browns. He to me he's the owner of Ohio, right? He runs that state. So yeah, you got to keep in mind that yes, you need to stop Jamar Chase here, right? 100%. You need to stop T. Higgins, 100%. But there are bigger goals for Baltimore. If the Ravens were, a middling option, a team that was like trying to take that next step, maybe make a divisional round game for the first time, yeah, there would be a lot of other conversations there. But with the Ravens being where they are, I think the Ravens adding talent is not with the Bengals in mind. Like, and look, I applaud Jamar for his confidence, saying that, everyone knows what they can do over there and they aren't hiding that. That's great. Like, you should have that confidence, and they have earned that confidence based off of how good they are and how potent we know that the trio of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins can be. He mentions the Ravens getting DBs every year too, and everyone's getting new pieces. I don't think Jamar Chase was like explicitly calling out the Ravens in some like, oh, we're going to get you type of way. But, I think these comments are saying, yeah, I'm excited for the challenge. And it's something where he was, and you can listen or watch it if you want to go listen to the interview yourself. I think he wasn't being like, oh yeah, like this is my division and we run this. No, the Ravens are the runners of the division right now. They're going for 3 straight AFC North titles, which has never been done before. But I'm excited for it too. Like I agree with Jamar Chase here where, getting reps against these guys, especially in that division where there are talented cornerbacks, are talented DBs, is going to be a battle, going to be a test, and we're going to see how it all unfolds. And coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be diving a little bit more into Jamar Chase's comments because he snubbed Marlon Humphrey from a toughest cornerback list where there were a lot of other AFC North corners on that list. So stay tuned, plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with killer last-minute deals. And for me, it can get tiring scrolling endlessly to find the best deal. But Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is actually the price you pay, so there are no hidden fees. And if you're worried about what happens if plans change, the Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Again, rookies report to training camp for the Ravens tomorrow on July 15th. Just, it's surreal that we're already back to this moment. Obviously, the full veteran contingent does not report back until next week, but still just these little check boxes, we're being able to check them off, and that to me is a really exciting feeling. So be sure to stay tuned for the rookie preview for training camp in the final part of the show. But I want to finish up our conversation about Jamar Chase as well as getting into what Mark Andrews had to say over the weekend here. So Jamar Chase, we talked about him and his confidence in his team, which again, you should, right? Jamar Chase has confidence in the Bengals, and I like that. You don't want to go and do an interview and be like, yeah, I'm not really sure. No, he expressed that confidence. That's great. And I think it was a little spicy considering what he said about the Ravens and the rest of the AFC North. But again, the confidence is there. Now, he ended up calling Denzel Ward the toughest corner he's played against, mentioned that, twice a year he's played against him. That's great, right? Denzel Ward's a really good quarterback. Obviously, he's had the injury concerns, particularly with the concussions, and that's a scary thing. But when he's on the field, Denzel Ward is extremely, extremely good. Now, he was also, Jamar Chase, asked to name his top 5 corners that he's played against. And every list is unique in his personal opinion, personal preference, right? It's not like a consensus, boom, 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 boom. It's different when these guys have experience. Like, I don't have experience going up against any of these guys. But Jamar Chase's list was Denzel Ward, Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay. And he was only going to go with those 4, and then he ended up going with Derrick Stingley, who obviously that's a fellow LSU Tiger for Jamar Chase. So 4 AFC North quarterbacks, no Baltimore Ravens on this list. The big one obviously being Marlon Humphrey. Now, I can understand this, but then, it's guys like Joey Porter Jr. And, he mentioned like the length on Joey Porter, Denzel Ward, he's mentioning the footwork on stuff. And obviously Jalen and Darius have been guys that he's gone up against. But man, Marlon Humphrey, I get it because of the fact that, again, he's been so good against the Ravens. Like the Ravens are a team that he beats up on. That patented spin move play that Marlon was involved on that. Like Marlon's been on the receiving end of some unfortunate Jamar Chase highlights from a Ravens perspective and from a Marlon Humphrey perspective. So I get it in that regard. Now we do have to remember though that Jamar and Marlon that play last year, Marlon had a couple of huge plays against the Bengals last season. Honestly, saved both of those games for them. The first one, which was in Cincinnati, the Bengals were driving with a shot to go up 7 or win the game if they scored a touchdown, and Joe Burrow threw it to Marlon Humphrey, though, picked off Joe Burrow, and that opened the door for Baltimore to come back and win that game after the defense, again, was just horrendous. The second game, he forced a fumble on Chase Brown, and that was a huge play in that game. So it's not like Marlon has been just absent of big plays against the Bengals. I think it's really been very hit or very miss for Marlon, and I think that, it's weird seeing a Joey Porter Jr. on a list over Marlon Humphrey. Now, this was not the most controversial thing that Jamar said about this cornerback list. Chiefs fans were livid. If you don't know, Jamar Chase absolutely despises the Chiefs. Just despise. Anytime you talk about the Chiefs, Jamar doesn't want to talk about it or he throws shade. It's one of the funniest beefs in the NFL. Jamar Chase versus the Chiefs, just the entirety of the team. There's been stuff, him and L'Jarius Sneed and others. Well, Trent McDuffie is obviously not on this list. And all the Chiefs fans were saying, oh, Trent McDuffie, he's not on there, Jamar. But 4 AFC North corners, none of them being Marlon Humphrey. Again, it's personal preference and personal experience. So, I'm not going to get on him too much about it. It does feel a little bit like a snub, but I can understand the snub because of some of the plays that Marlon has been a part of in that rivalry. But on the flip side of that, I wanted to include, Marlon's had some low moments in the rivalry, but he's also had some really high ones. And, it is a tale of both worlds there. So Jamar Chase and this Bengals team, it's not an offensive issue I have with them. It's a head coach and defensive issue. I just don't think they're good enough. It's not any fault of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, or T. Higgins. I'm a fan of all three of those guys. Yeah, I don't think they're going to go anywhere with their coach and their defense. So that's enough of that. Let's get into Mark Andrews. Now, Mark Andrews, there was an event over the weekend, and he opened up during this event. So this coming from Jonas Schaefer over at the Baltimore Banner. If you want to go check out Jonas's article for a little more detail, go check it out. It's a great read. Now, Mark Andrews was in Baltimore for an event with Dexcom and a bunch of college athletes living with diabetes. Mark Andrews has been very open about his journey with diabetes, being a professional athlete and managing it. He's been an advocate and, he's spread a lot of awareness about it. And he wanted to make it clear that giving back to the community, he said, quote, giving back to this community, knowing people that know what it's like to live with this disease is a type 1 diabetic, to be out here with these kids and these collegiate athletes. I've said it before, but I'm not only here for them to give them advice, but I'm also here for me and myself. And so, again, it's been really awesome to see Mark Andrews be as open as he has. And, it was an awesome event. There were a lot of fun videos from it. He was having fun and, getting after it with these collegiate athletes and the whole thing was great. But he also opened up a little bit about the Ravens and the football side of things here. And he said that he had to, quote, eat a lot of crap in the last however long it's been. And he said, quote, but I'm excited to go show who I am, what I can be, and what I can help this team with because I'm not done yet. And of course, the focus during this event was on diabetes and diabetes care and the misconceptions around it and that whole conversation. But he also, again, getting back to the football aspect of it, he was told that an ESPN survey of league executives, coaches, and scouts found that he was still considered a top 10 tight end. And he kind of smiled apparently and said, quote, I think that there's not many 11 touchdown guys left off the top tight end list, but it is what it is. Again, it wasn't until 6 games that I scored a touchdown, so I know what I can do. There's points last year where I wasn't my best. I wasn't fully there, but I've got a great direction. I've been able to take care of my body, learn different ways to stay at the top of my game, and just know what I can bring and who I am as a player. It's still there. So Mark has confidence, and honestly, in my opinion, he should. I get what happened. I've said this over and over again. It was a rough game for Mark Andrews in Buffalo. It's been a rough career for Mark when it comes to his postseason compared to his regular season. It was a great regular season player, But in the playoffs, for the most part, he hasn't really been there when it matters for them. He's had, either no-show acts or, he's had very costly plays like he did against the Bills, and that's been tough. But in my opinion, he is still a top 10 tight end. I think he's top 5 still, in my opinion. I know that might not be popular consensus, but I'm not going to completely bring down a guy for, his worst moment. And on the field, obviously, I think that Buffalo game was Mark Andrews' worst moment. It's not that that's the only time he hasn't shown up in the playoffs. I get that and I understand it. But, I think it's a disservice to everything Mark has accomplished and the fact that 32 out of 32 teams would take Mark Andrews on their team in some way, shape, or form, whether it be running duo tight end ones like I think the Ravens are doing right now with him and Isaiah Likely, or is their starter. They're clearing away. I always imagine it like this. The Bengals right now, it's Mike Gesicki, right? The Bengals would take Mark Andrews. That'd be an upgrade in an instant. That would make that offense extremely dangerous. And honestly, I'm going to stop talking about it because I don't want to imagine it anymore. But that's the type of fit that Mark Andrews could provide for a lot of different teams. Now, is his Ravens tenure going to extend the next 5 years? I doubt it. I think this is probably Mark Andrews' last year. They can't pay both Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews unless some miracle happens, and miracles do happen, but I'm not going to anticipate that does. But there's no point to me in trading Mark, especially now after the draft, when you can get the value for him this year as a top 10, top 5 tight end, regardless of where you are on that. And then he leaves in the offseason and you get a third, fourth, whatever it is, comp pick for him back with the contract he signs. I think that's the clear path that's going to happen here. It's kind of laid out right in front of our eyes. And, to me, I think that even if he's not getting 10 targets a game or he's not catching 7 balls per game, his ability to draw defenders and the chemistry he has with Lamar Jackson, that stuff is valuable. It's not going to necessarily show up in the box score or anything, but it's valuable. So to me, I think that Mark, again, he, had to deal with a lot this offseason. And look, he didn't perform well. The fan base reacted, honestly, in my opinion, far too harshly for it, particularly in the fact of the threats he received and the nasty comments. Like, I get it. You didn't perform and everyone's upset about it, disappointed. I was upset and disappointed. I still am upset and disappointed about that. But it went way too far, and he did have to deal with a lot of that. And, Mark understands that he messed up in those moments, that he wasn't there for his team in those moments. And he should not be let off the hook for that. But there's a way that you can criticize somebody without going as far as some people did. And the people who went that far, it is unacceptable to do that. So in my opinion, Mark, I think will have a good year for them. It's a contract year for that entire tight end room. And we're going to see, because I think Mark can make a statement this year and Isaiah Likely can too. So we'll see how those targets are divvied up and shared. But, at the end of the day, I still think Mark is a very, very talented player who has dealt with a lot over the course of his career and, has done an admirable job is turning into Lamar Jackson's security blanket and helping this team win a lot of football games. So, I'm hoping Mark has a big year, and I'm hoping that he can be a reason why the Ravens hopefully win a Super Bowl this year. Coming up in the final part of the show, though, rookies. They report to training camp tomorrow. We're going to talk about the rookie class a little bit, get a little refresher going, and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, still talking with you here on this Monday. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll actually be back here later tonight for the Ravens Squad show. Again, Locked On Ravens is Monday through Friday. The regular show is 6 a.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. But we have added on the Locked On Ravens Squad show, which is myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail, that is live on Mondays and Thursdays on the Locked On Ravens YouTube channel at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So be sure to hop in the chat, say hey, share your thoughts. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you can't catch it live, it will be available for playback in both video form and audio form, so you do not miss out on it. It's been awesome. This is the second week. We've had some awesome conversation, a lot of laughs, and we did some rankings on Thursday. We're going to react to them on Monday. So we're going to dive into that whole conversation. But let's dive into these rookies. I'm pumped. Ravens training camp rookies. They report tomorrow. This to me is the start of it. It's the start of the year. I think the feeling will fully set in once the vets come into town and, those training camp days really start. We get to look at those positional battles a little further here. But that's kind of what I want to dive into, and we're going to dive into it a little bit more, obviously, tomorrow on the day that rookies report, and we'll have updates and the whole 9 yards. But I think, to me, this is just roster-wide. There aren't a lot of starting spots, let alone roster spots, that are up for grabs here. So these guys are going to be in the heated competition. Obviously, we know some of them are going to have major roles. And actually, we're going to talk about the rookie class. Why not go over a little bit what it actually was? Just a reminder, obviously, they took Malaki Starks, safety out of Georgia, at number 27. Then they followed it up with Mike Green, edge from Marshall in the second round. They brought in Emory Jones, an O-lineman from LSU in the third round. Then you got guys like Teddy Buchanan and Carson Vincent, who I think, will be competing, but maybe won't have big roles off the bat. I think Teddy Buchanan has a shot, but we'll see. Obviously, I think Tyler Loop is going to be a player for them. At least you hope. I know we had a little bit of a struggle during spring practices, but hopefully he gets that together. DeJounte Wester, I think a really solid return option that could have a role on offense. And then I think another guy I got to mention is Aeneas Peebles, who was my favorite pick for them on day 3. So, you look at those guys, I think everybody's, the anticipation is pretty high. Guys like Malaki Starks and Mike Green, those are the two everybody's going to have their eyes on. But I'm really intrigued to see what DeJounte Wester can do personally. I think he's kind of penciled in as that 6th wide receiver. But, we've talked with Kadri Ismail and others who see the offensive potential and the offensive value in a guy like DeJounte Wester. Can he establish himself early on in training camp? And I don't think that's going to be, he's going to dethrone DeAndre Hopkins as number 3. I don't know. That's not where I'm going with that. But I think that in a specific package role, you could maybe see DeJounte Wester. We know that Todd Monken has gotten a little too infatuated at times with moving Zay Flowers horizontally and not vertically, and that's run him into some trouble. I think that you can utilize DeJounte Wester in that gadget role and, I definitely say graduate Zay from that. I think he graduated a little bit last year, but just not even having the possibility would be huge. And these Peoples, I mentioned it, someone who's going to provide a lot as a pass rusher, not so much as a run stuffer here, but, he fell due to his size. It wasn't necessarily due to his skill as a pass rusher. He can get to the quarterback, and I think he and John Jenkins honestly pair very well with one another, where John Jenkins can be the early down guy, run stuffer, but John Jenkins doesn't have the juice that Michael Pierce did as a pass rusher. Now, I'm not saying Michael Pierce was a 10-sack guy on the interior, but John Jenkins, I think, is more so definitely like a 2-down player. He's one-dimensional, whereas Michael Pierce at least gave you the option. Hey, he's a ball hawk too, by the way, as we saw against the Cleveland Browns in week number 18. Interception for the ages, one of my favorite moments ever, Ravens moment ever. It was awesome. But I think that Peebles can come in and have a rotational role. And look, it's not like Broderick Washington has impressed a ton during his years in Baltimore. I think that Peebles could take a role from him there, where I'm expecting a big year from Travis Jones. We know Nnamdi Madubuike is going to do his thing. I think Peebles does have a path for snaps. Is it going to be a lot of them? I wouldn't say that, but I would definitely think that he has an opportunity and an option. I don't know if either of the Ravens' 2 rookie corners are going to make the roster. It's their day 3 guys. I like Longerbeam as a potential special teams guy. But I think with the addition of Jaire Alexander, it's already pushing another guy off of the roster. Is that Jalen Armour-Davis? Or are they going to keep both of their day 3 rookies? I don't know the answer to that question. That's a battle, though. Maybe it is rookie versus rookie for one spot, and we'll see if they decide to keep one or the other. Or maybe they do end up making some room and making a tough decision, but we'll kind of see how that unfolds. I know that there is a competition technically between Tyler Loop and John Hoyland for kicker, but I think the writing's on the wall for Tyler Loop to win that job, even if he struggles. The only way that Baltimore makes change there is if it is just atrocious. And there are going to be growing pains. Like what we saw from Tyler Loop and, what we heard about him, some of these tough days at OTAs and minicamp, it's expected. The coaching staff is trying to tinker with him a little bit, figure out what it is and what they need to have him work on before the season. This is when you want to do that, when you want to work with rookies, work with your younger guys, and try to tweak things here and there. You don't want to do that in week 2 of the regular season, right? Do it before the games count. If that results in some rough practices, is you're getting acclimated and you're trying to incorporate those things the coaching staff has done for you and is helping you with in that, then okay, like that's fine. But again, you can't have it necessarily be a long-term thing. That would not be good. I mean, look, Mike Green's going to be competing for snaps early with Calvin Noy and Afe Owe. I expect him to have a major role. Malaki Starks is going to start for this team week 1. So, that's already there as well. A lot of really intriguing options. I'm not expecting a lot from Emory Jones. I don't think he plays a ton this year. I think the guard spots are Falele and Voorhees. Now, how good you feel about that is probably, up to how well you like Daniel Falele. I think people are higher on Voorhees than they are Falele. While we did see improvement from Falele later in the season, still wasn't good enough consistently, in my opinion, he was a Pro Bowl alternate. Well, that was a little bit crazy. So it's going to be exciting because, you talk about like the rookies, but the vets will come in and they'll push them. But this is a nice step in the right direction to getting football back. We are close. We're so close to getting it back. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in today, listening, watching to Locked On Ravens. That's all I have for you. But do not fret. We'll be back here later tonight again. Myself, Sam Njoku, and Kadri Ismail for the Ravens squad show. And of course, tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern time, we'll be right back here for the regular show of Locked On Ravens. So on the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form, follow along in audio form, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.